You talk about difficulties and trials. We heard about Syedna Maryam. We heard about Syedna Asya, both of which had very difficult trials. So what is it about Syedna Khadija? Well, here starts the story of many things to come. She's widowed only 2 years after getting married. And not only that, but she's had 2 children. Today, inshallah, I'm going to be covering Syedna Khadija. Khadija bint Khuwaylid, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in her story, which many of you know, I mean, everything I'm going to say here is probably review, by and large. But the reason we review and re-review is because, subhanAllah, every time we uncover something beautiful, a gem that we haven't really thought of before, or maybe we haven't paid attention to in some long period of time, and then you draw connections to your own life or the life of other sisters around you, and it suddenly all clicks together, subhanAllah. Khadija radiallahu anha, her name literally means the one who was born early. She was born premature. She was born earlier than her parents expected her to be, and hence her name. But at the very end of our talk, we're going to sum it up by saying she wasn't just born into this dunya early, she was also early, ahead of her time and ahead of her generation and ahead of most women of society, including today, right? And her beliefs and what she accomplished was well ahead of many, subhanAllah. And so as we look at Syedna Khadija radiallahu anha, we have to start actually with her parents. Well, her parents, mashallah, were noble people of Quraysh. And her father had a dream while his wife, Khadija's mother, was pregnant. And he woke up very excited because he saw in this dream that he was that he was a young boy, and he had his, you know how you kind of take your shirt to gather fruit, in it? And there were dates, really ripe dates. And they were being put into his shirt. And as much as they were putting these dates, it wouldn't fill. And then he was able to taste this date, and then suddenly he woke up, realizing it's a dream. So he got very excited, and he went to his wife and he said, I think we're going to have a boy. Another theme, inshallah, of today, right? And his wife kind of just, isn't as excited as he is, and she asks her, why are you not, so excited? And she says, because in the dream, her interpretation and what she had learned is that dates mean girls. And this would be their firstborn. And in Quraysh, in that society, this is pre-Islamic, right? In that tribal pre-Islamic society, having your firstborn be a girl meant possibly that it would have, that they would be buried alive, female infanticide, because it was shameful. The first had to be a boy. And he comes from a very honorable family, and there was expectations. This is Khuwaylid, his father is Asad, and there's expectations that the firstborn of the great nobleman Asad, his father, would be a boy, a grandson. And so, as you can imagine, now comes the birth, and Syedna Khadija, as we now know, right, is of course a girl, and born early. And her father, Khuwaylid, is very worried, because he's worried that as soon as they see that it's a girl, they're going to advise him to bury her alive. And so, here comes the birth of still Khadija, and her father's trembling, kind of really worried. His father, Asad, has come, and all the rest of his, tribe has come. And they're waiting to see. And the news comes out that this is a girl. And he's worried. But then he sees that his father, right, Khadija's grandfather, is looking at her almost like with a change of heart. She seems something very special. Like, they talk about how, like, she's very light, as in nur, light, like light emanating from her. They see kind of a light, a nur. And at that point in time, the head of the tribe is none other than, I wonder who can tell me. Do you guys know who would be the head of Quraysh at this period of time? Abd al-Muttalib. Who is whom? The grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So like distant, there is a connection between them, but it's not like direct, right? But he's the head, okay, of the tribe. So he comes too. And so here is her grandfather Asad, and here is the head of Quraysh, Abd al-Muttalib. And they're standing there, and they're kind of wondering about this girl, who is a girl, not a boy, but is very like, has all this nur, light kind of emanating from her. And at that period in time, it's like Allah put something in their heart to change it. And at that point, Abd al-Muttalib, who would have given kind of a small gift if it was a girl, this is all Jahili, like pre-Islamic, time of ignorance, right? A small gift if it was a girl and a large gift if it was a boy. And suddenly, not only did he give the gift that he was coming to give, but he emptied out all of his pockets and everything he had. He just felt in his heart, this is going to be a special person. She would have died, but Allah has saved her for something very, very important and special that's to come, inshallah ta'ala. And so we continue on, and there's something very unique about her, of course, is this born kind of with this light, subhanAllah. Now, her father and her mother decide that also very unique in her time is to educate her. Her cousin, who's much, much older, several decades older, maybe about 50 or so years older than her, is her cousin Waraqa. You know this name, Waraqa ibn Nawfal. And so they take her as a little girl to Waraqa to be taught by him. He's a learned man. He's studied the gospel, he's studied the Torah, he's studied so many different things, and he becomes her personal teacher. And so she studies with him for years, right? And she's able to read, she's able to write, and she's very bright. And the news gets out about her that not only is she very beautiful, but she's also very intelligent. And so she's got marriage proposals coming in left and right. And her family reject them, right? Until she reaches 15 years. At that point, her family says she's got to get married. And let me just pause here for a moment. When we talk about young ages, don't think about yourself in 2021 in this era trying to understand young aged marriage. You have to put yourself back in that society, back in that time, where if your life expectancy is about 30, then 15 is half your life. It makes sense to get married then. In fact, many of the girls of her era would have already been married. Do you see what I'm saying? So before people start making a fuss, think about that. You know this. You know this because how old were the Prophet's parents, both, when they passed away, the Prophet ﷺ's parents? They married young. His father didn't even see the Prophet ﷺ, so what does that put him age-wise? He hadn't reached 20. Syedna Amina, his mother, had also passed away, just years into the Prophet's toddlerhood. People died young in that age. Do you see what I'm saying? So here she is at the age of 15, back to Sayyidah Khadija. And so it's time for her to get married. And she doesn't necessarily want to, but she knows that this is something that her society and her parents want of her. And when the proposal comes, right, and this is now, his name is Abu Hala, who comes to propose, they can't really say no. He's honest, he's hardworking, he's honorable, he has an honorable lineage, and he's also wealthy, which becomes an important point that we'll talk about in a moment. He has everything in a Meccan society that would be important for someone of her nobility and stature. So she asks her parents, they say this is a good fit. She asks her uncle and teacher, her cousin rather, and teacher Waraqa. He says this is a good fit, and so she agrees. She gets married at the age of 15, and here we start to see some really important things start to happen. You talk about difficulties and trials. We heard about Syedna Maryam. We heard about Syedna Asya, both of which had very difficult trials. So what is it about Syedna Khadija? Well, here starts the story of many things to come. She's widowed only 2 years after getting married. And not only that, but she's had 2 children. She's had Hala and Hind, who are boys. If you're wondering, for anybody who's kind of familiar with the names as being girl names, why are the boys girl names? It's because there was a Jahili, pre-Islamic society, a thing of like protecting any nazar or ayn, or evil eye from the boys by naming them girls. And that's how low in society girls were considered, right? They won't be given the evil eye if they're girls. So she has Hala and she has Hind, the 2 boys, and her husband, Abu Hala, passes away, right, before even the second one is born. So here she is at 17, a widow and a single mother. More themes, right? You seeing the similarity here? Yeah. And so at that point in time, she decides, she's very, mashallah, very a bright person. So she decides to actually, because she's inherited, this is an important part, because Abu Hala was very wealthy, she inherits a large sum of money. So you think that somebody who has lost their husband and is widowed at 17 and a single mother of 2 children, it would be disastrous and very difficult. Well, things are not always what they seem. Because what if it was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put Abu Hala in her path to allow her to have somebody, not only to have these children, subhanAllah, but also she inherited a good sum of money. And with this money, she could have just used it easily and kind of sat in her, high level of society, of elite of Mecca, right? And just, took care of her kids. But she decided to put that brilliance into business. And so she does something else in the column of unique for her time. She becomes a businesswoman. And not only does she become a businesswoman, because you could outsource this and have it to other men to run your business, no, she runs it herself. And it's noticed about her that every time her caravan goes out, it comes back with more profit compared to the other men. She's doing really well. Very intelligent, mashallah. And it's almost like I don't need to do exactly the stereotype of every other woman of society. This is what Allah has written for me, and I'm going to make the best of it. So she dedicates herself to business and to raising her children. Now, she's very young still. And in that society, it's expected that she would be married again. And so proposals keep coming in. And now, add to everything else we said already in the list of characteristics, she's wealthy. Even more reason. Every person wants to propose to her. And she turns them down, turns them down, turns them down, until we get to a man named Atiq. And similar to her first husband, Abu Hala, he's also from a noble lineage. He himself is wealthy, so he's not looking to her wealth. He's independently wealthy. And he's industrious, a hard worker. And so her family and her advisor and teacher, Waraqah, and everybody else agrees that this would be a good fit for her and a good match. And so she goes ahead and marries for the second time at the age of 17. And she has a girl from this marriage named Hinda. Now, very similar to the first marriage, after Hinda is born, her father is going out to the caravan with the caravan and never returns. He passes away. She's widowed twice over and 3 children. Twice widowed and 3 children. In this period of time, this, and even to today, put yourself in even today's shoes, this is difficult, this is heavy, what do you do with this exactly? What does she do, Syedna Khadija? She takes all of this and she turns it into, again, Allah wrote this for me, therefore I'm going to surrender to what He's written to me, for me. And she's doing well business-wise, so she dedicates all her energy into business and her family. And she forgets about marriage. She says, I've tried this. Clearly it wasn't written for me, right? Every time she gets married, within 2 years, the husband dies. SubhanAllah, right? So now she's a businesswoman, and for years, maybe 15 years, this is what she's doing. Dedicated to her business, doing very well, mashallah, successful, and something very unique about her, unlike the women of her time, she's very tuned into the poor, the needy, the orphans, and she uses her wealth to help these folks. Not only that, but also unlike the women of her time, especially the elite, kind of wealthy woman of Mecca, she takes care of her children by herself. She leads a simple life, not a luxurious life that she could have led because she's wealthy, but she decides to do things for herself by herself, which allows her to have empathy and understand those who don't have a lot. So now, as we fast forward into the story, 15 years of this story, subhanAllah, but something important happens when she's 34 years old. Her father passes away. And her father, of course, is a very important person to her. And within a very short period of time, her mother passes away as well. So suddenly, she's alone. No parents, no husbands, right? And Waraqah, her mentor, is in his 80s. But she keeps on getting advice from him, and she does visit with him very regularly and kind of seeks him out for any advice and help. And in this period of time, she has this discussion with Waraqah, because she hears from him constantly, because he keeps on saying this message over and over. There is a prophet to come, and he's imminent. It's happening. It's in the Torah. It's in the gospel. It is happening. It is coming. So she's hearing this very regularly. And one night, she has a dream.